Hello and welcome to the March 2020 layout update from the Trent Valley Railway. In this update we'll take a look at the Hornby Class 60 with DCC sound. I'll talk through the progress with the accessory decoders on the lower level of the layout, and I've put in each of the common left and right wires for each of the 4 points. And finally, a look at the preparations for the track laying on the scenery section. I've been working to cut the webbing on the back of these track lengths from Pico with the concrete sleepers on them. The latest loco on the layout for DCC sound is this Hornby Class 60 with collis rail freight. So we'll just move this away and then we'll see the DCC sound in a few more shots around the layout. The Hornby Class 60 here in collis rail livery has a TTS Hornby sound decoder inside it for the Class 60. There's a few functions which you'll have heard throughout those few running shots, and apologies that for the meantime those shots were only on the incline section between the lower level and the scenery level. As you'll note at the very top, the track has now been taken up temporarily before being relayed properly through the scenery section. There's more on that later on in the update, but first of all, now let's get on and talk about the accessory decoders I've been installing on the lower level of the layout. In the previous February layout update, I was talking about trying to recycle some of the old point decoders from the Sandwich and Ashford model railway. Now, some of these have gone past their sell-by date now, and this is one of the original sets of 8 that DCC Concepts did, and these don't really have enough power within them to operate one of the SEEP point motors, so these come as a 4 for the ESU switch pilot. Now, I'm trying to recycle these, so I might use them elsewhere on the layout rather than using them for solenoid point motors, so I can use them for momentary outputs on both of these. So I'm not going to throw these away, but see if I can recycle them elsewhere. But in the meantime, I've now been able to purchase these different sets, which are the latest versions from DCC Concepts. So these are the solenoid accessory decoders. They come with 2 outputs, or originally as well an 8 output set here, and they now come also in their latest range in a 4 output. So each of those will be very useful in different areas around the layout, whether I need to group 2 decoders for points together, or whether I need to group a set of 4 points together, or obviously 8 in the main fiddle yard. I now go into more detail about wiring one of these up and use a 4 output solenoid decoder there in the middle to do the lift out section in the middle, and then also show you the progress hopefully around the rest of the layout using the other 8 and the 2 outputs. The next part of fitting all of the point decoders for the lower level of the layout is then to move on to this lift out section on the very lower level. So this is the underside of it with all the wiring that I previously did to run the trains, and have the red and black positive and negative bus wire, as well as then the green wires for the frog on the points. So I've now got a ADS4SX DCC concept solenoid decoder, and this will then be wired up into each of the points on this lift out section. Taking a closer look at this decoder here, this will focus in. There's a DCC input at either end to daisy chain these around your layout, and then there's also a button at the end there which to press once you need to do some rewiring here to make sure you discharge the CDUs that are in this. Within this there are 4 CDUs, as this has got 4 point decoders, so that it has the charge ready to switch each of the solenoid Gagemaster PM1 point decoders that I have on the underside of the layout. Then on each of the sides of this, there's 4 sides which say solenoid, switches, frog and LED. So I'm using at the moment just the solenoid ones, but you can also then add in more outputs and inputs into each decoder to create a panel, an LED panel to show the switching, and also to power the frog for each of the point motors. So I'll now get on with wiring up this across this section. What I've just done is wired up the second DCC bus wire for all of the accessory decoders, and I've chosen here 2 colours of pink and purple for this accessory bus. It does feed back to the Z21 and connect into the same wires that the red and the black wires connect to in the main track power from the Z21. But I've then separated them as soon as I leave the Z21, so that if I get any problems on either of the bus wires I can separate them without interference. So that's the stage for adding the pink and the purple bus wire, and then these will now go into the DCC end of the point decoder here. Across the layout I've colour coded the wiring so it's consistent for each of the point motors, and then connecting it up with the track, the live for the frog, which is the green, and then also the point motors going into each of these decoders. So for each of these, the blue is the common wire, and then I have an orange wire which goes to A on the SEEP point motor, and then a brown wire which goes to F on the other side of the point motor. So this then translates into, for the DCC Concepts point decoder here, I'm going with left is the orange wire, the common, which is the center, is the blue wire, and then the right is the brown wire. So I'll now connect each of the 4 points on this section up with the solenoid point decoder. This is now the completed wiring for this lift out section on the very lower level of the layout. and I've put in each of the common left and right wires for each of the 4 points on this lower level lift out section. Just like the other Cobalt DCC point motors that I showed you in last month's update, these have a little switch on them to run or then set for when you want to apply the DCC accessory number from your main control system, so that these can operate through this flick of a switch. For me, this is on then the Z21 system. So I now put this back into the section of the layout on the lower level, and then test this to make sure that all of the decoder points are working and flick the switches as required through the Z21 app. I've now got the lift out section back in place in front of the garage door here. I'm just going to quickly walk through how I am going to set number 520 on the Z21 app for the point there on the screen, for this point on the layout in very front here, so this one here, which then goes down towards the very bottom right hand corner. I've already moved the switch on the accessory decoder underneath this section to set, and I'm now going to flick the switch on 520 on the iPad, and that has now set the decoder for that number 520 and the corresponding point on the layout. I'll now move the switch back to run, and then we'll test this to make sure that it throws in the right direction. Having now moved the switch to run on the accessory decoder underneath the lift out section here, I'll now press 520, and there we go, we see the point throw in the right direction actually for also the corresponding green right away on the Z21 app. So now I've got that one sorted, I'll move on to setting the other 3 points on this lift out section with the corresponding numbers and the diagram in the Z21 app. I've now set the other 3 points on this lift out section to 519, 521 and 522. For all of these, I've actually found out that the throw, if I click 519, is actually in the opposite direction to how I'd like it to throw based on what's shown on the Z21 app. So that should now be a through route towards the other point on that running line, but it's actually throwing for the turnout. So I'm going to go back and into control station. If I click on the point for 519 and click edit, I'm now going to switch the throws on these for 0 on that one and 1 on the opposite way to reverse that. Go back and save, go into the app again, and now if I now look at 519, it's already showing now for the turnout in the correct direction. If we throw it, it now shows the through route. So I'll do that as well for 521 and 522, and then that is this area now sorted for the point decoders and operating all of these points from the Z21 app. Following on from showing you the wiring up of the solenoid decoder underneath the lift out section on the lower level, I've now continued and also installed all of the rest of the solenoid decoders on the lower level of the layout. Over the past month, I've installed 4 of the 2 output accessory decoders, 6 of the 4 output accessory decoders, and now 1 of the 8 output accessory decoder for the solenoid ADS range from DCC Concepts. I've spent a lot of time since the last update wiring up all of the orange, the blue and the brown wires from each of the SEEP point motors, and then all of these have been installed underneath the baseboard on that lower level. I've then also wired them up to then the accessory decoder bus wire, which is the pink and the purple, and you'll see from most of these pictures there are many different locations dotted around then the lower level where I've had to go in and wire these up and connect it back to the main system, test it, and thankfully now it's all working, and in a future video I will show the operation of these accessory decoder switches for the points through the Z21 app and show some trains running through the fiddle yard. I've been spending a lot of time working on preparing the track for the scenery section. At the very front is the standard Pico piece of track, and that's the same as those that are just laid out to show the container sidings for this scenery section. And over the last month I've been working to cut the webbing on the back of these track lengths from Pico with the concrete sleepers on them, so that each concrete sleeper is separate for the scenery section track. This will then help to get the spacing between the sleepers to be much more realistic. So these four here I've just spaced out at 9mm centres. It roughly gives you around about 5 to 6mm spacing between each of the concrete sleepers, and when that is done for the whole length of this scenery section, I'm hoping it looks a lot more aesthetically pleasing than the standard Pico track concrete sleeper spacing that they provide you with straight out of the box. You'll also notice here then that I've also got the DCC bus wiring attached to the bottom of the sleepers. I'll move those if they don't align where I need them, but I've done this set of tracks for one direction, and I've also got the other direction as well. The last main bit of the track work on the scenery section on the main running lines is then a concrete sleeper point that I've also wired up, and again I've very neatly gone in and wired up the wiring underneath the webbing of the concrete sleeper point, so that that will sit flush on top of the cork underlay when I also come to lay that on the scenery section. So I hopefully will plan to do all of the track laying when it gets a little bit warmer, so it's in the middle temperature between not too cold and then not too hot here in the garage, so that when I do leave the gaps between each of these sections of track, when it expands or decontracts, I won't get any problems with the rail joins. So I'm hoping to do that towards the end of March and then early April, so by the next layout update I'm hoping to have all of the track down for the main running lines on the scenery section. That's it for this update. Thank you very much for watching, and please do continue to like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thank you.